and welcome to the Weekly Rushes. Sorry for the delay on this one. Things like anniversaries got in the way this week. Yeah, it's an anniversary, but nothing's getting in the way of my coffee. Oh no. It's the Weekly Rushes, your rush through the weekly movie and streaming news. And as we always do, I need to imbibe my double espresso. Hopefully it'll keep us going at a fair old clip. So the big news, obviously, if this had landed last Friday, the big news, of course, was the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. That was the big off-camera, offset news. Amber Heard issued a statement afterwards saying she is heartbroken by the verdict in favour of Johnny Depp. She said, "The disappointment I feel today is beyond words." Her lawyer, Elaine, went on, I think NBC News or something, saying that she was going to appeal, though there's been no sounds as to whether she is appealing now. I wondered whether this was more a case of Amber's legal counsel wanting to save some face. She can't afford to pay Johnny back. I think the greatest thing that could happen out of this would be if Johnny was to turn around and say, you don't need to pay me back, or just forego the fee or something like that. I don't know. I feel there's a smart move that he could do to show a sort of almost a peace offering. I don't know. So Amber, so I think the prospects for Amber don't look good. Obviously she's in Aquaman 2. It's going to be intriguing to see whether the film is thrown back in the edit to reduce her presence in the film even more than they have done already, as suggested by the head of Warner Brothers. But Johnny Depp, what about Johnny Depp and his possible rehabilitation, if you like, in the light of being found, or, you know, of the jury finding in his favour, essentially? Could he return for a new Pirates movie? Could there be a new Pirates movie? I mean, I said straight after the trial, I said, I'm sure that Disney executives will be looking for all sorts of ways to get around things, and they have history of doing this. Do not forget that James Gunn, not in no way equivalent, posted sort of inappropriate tweets about paedophiles, and they were jokes, and they were kind of tasteless jokes in retrospect, and he was subsequently dropped from Guardians of the Galaxy. He was picked up by Warner Brothers, made Suicide Squad, we know all of that, and now he's come back to Disney as a rehabilitated figure. And I wonder whether Johnny Depp could do the same thing. Some of the kind of, you know, more kind of geeky kind of websites, news gathering sites have kind of suggested that some Disney execs have been suggesting that there's the possibility of a reboot. One Disney ex-Disney executive who remains nameless says, "I absolutely believe post-verdict that Pirates is primed for rebooting with Johnny as Captain Jack back on board. There's just too much potential box office treasure in there, them Pirates Eye, that desert island there." There's too much potential box office treasure for a beloved character deeply embedded in the Disney culture. And I'm inclined to agree. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if it didn't happen quite quickly. Jerry Bruckheimer was doing the rounds. Obviously, he's the producer of Top Gun Maverick, which is doing sensational business at the box office. $543 million worldwide when I last looked. Quite something. And most significantly of all, its second weekend drop in box office takings was only 32%, which is astonishing when you think that something like, say, Doctor Strange recently fell by 80% in its second week. So holding strong and looking like it's going to be, well, it already is Tom Cruise's most successful film. So Jerry Bruckheimer, the producer of that, you know, he'll be sort of dancing around the halls of, I don't know, Valhalla, just screaming with joy. Will he be looking at the possibility of being able to do a repeat sort of thing with Pirates of the Caribbean? I think he could be. He said, whilst doing the rounds for Top Gun, that there are two scripts in play. One has Margot Robbie in it as a possible replacement, or sort of, you know, main character, if you like, a sort of Captain Jack Sparrow type lead, but the other one has no one attached, and it's the other one that I'm intrigued about. What was the language he said? We're developing two pirate scripts, one with her, one without. So it might be without Margot, but who is it with? And what do you think? Do you think that this could happen? Do you think it will happen? I personally think if Disney felt they could, I think they would have the highest grossing Pirates film of all time, least of all for the fact that we'd all be watching to see if Johnny was actually using an earpiece, albeit that he only used it to listen to music, but it would be intriguing to see how he performed on set. Another insider, I love these insiders, I think this is the Den of Geek have reported this, another insider, unnamed, says no A-list movie is going to hire him the way they used to. He was a pain in the arse before the trial, always, and what he's proven is he's still a pain in the arse. He'd have to stop being late, and he'd have to stop smashing things up. Do you know what I mean? I mean, he'd have to kind of get a grip and kind of grow up and sort of, you know, maybe not drink mega pints and maybe, you know, be on set on time and stuff like that. But it could happen. I personally think it is going to happen, and I think you're going to be surprised. I think it's going to happen sooner than you think. Some first look images here. We were enormous fans of the Bradley Cooper Lady Gaga movie A Star Is Born, which was just, you know, a remake of a remake of a remake. Obviously there was a very famous version with Barbara Streisand back in the 70s. It was an incredibly moving film and a surprising film for us in that it pivoted around his alcoholism and all that kind of stuff and looked at it in quite a sort of searingly honest and intense way. Well, Bradley Cooper, who directed that as well as starring in it, is starring in and directing a new film called Maestro, which is for Netflix, which was originally going to be directed by Steven Spielberg, about the musician-composer Leonard Bernstein, who obviously wrote the score and the music to West Side Story, which obviously Steven Spielberg recently directed. Bradley Cooper is starring as the titular composer, Leonard Bernstein. His wife is being played by Carey Mulligan. She is just one of my favourite actresses. She's just something else. Her and Florence Pugh are two of my absolute sort of guilty pleasures. As I say, Steven Spielberg was originally attached to direct, and he wanted Cooper to star in it. But Bradley Cooper, having got a taste for directing, kind of pleaded with Spielberg, and in fact said this is what Bradley Cooper says. He said, "I told Spielberg I always felt like I could play a conductor, but may I research the material and see if I can write it and direct it instead? Would you let me do that?" Stephen has a lot of interest, says Cooper. He'll just choose one thing and all the other things will be on hold. I think he knew he wasn't going to make this movie for a while. He was kind enough to hand it over to me, and that's what I've been doing for the last 4.5 years. Imagine just going, oh man, yeah, I just haven't got time to do that massive Netflix hit about Leonard Bernstein. Shit, Bradley, yeah, you direct it, go for it. I mean, he's a reliable pair of directing hands. But here's the thing, and I'd be really curious to know what you think about this. Here are some of the first look images. Some kind of controversy has been kicked up in the Jewish community surrounding the fact that in order to play the part, Bradley Cooper has had a much larger nose prosthetically created for him. And in some quarters, there have been some Jewish observers and critics and what have you, suggesting why didn't they just cast someone of Jewish origin or of Jewish descent? Why have they focused on an item of the character's facial anatomy that traditionally and historically has been a much maligned part of, Jewish, sort of stereotypical Jewish caricatures and what have you? It's a really aggressive and nasty sort of stereotype that's been used and harnessed by racists. But Bradley Cooper and the production have come in for some stick because apparently they shouldn't have adjusted his nose to make him look more like Leonard Bernstein. This is a disrespectful move, and also perhaps they should have considered casting a Jewish actor anyway. I'm not entirely sure what I think about all of that. If you're going for likeness of a character, again, does this not come back down to intention? What is the intention behind it? And I know for a fact that Bradley Cooper and Steven Spielberg and co would not be suggesting that Bradley Cooper get a prostheticized nose to look like Leonard Bernstein because they think Jewish people have big noses. I just think, Leonard Bernstein, they were probably going for a likeness of Leonard Bernstein, and Bradley Cooper's face didn't get there quite. But it's a curious one. It's an interesting one. It's a tricky one, and it's a sensitive subject. Deadpool, any Deadpool fans out there? Deadpool 1 was just so scatologically rude and awful. Hashtag flyby for a little fart as he walks past the sofa. Deadpool 2 was even better because, of course, it had Josh Brolin with his remarkable chin that I've just missed. There just hasn't been much of his chin since, well, for the last 2 years, really. I was in love with him, in love with the cleft of his chin, and now his cleft has gone. Deadpool 3, the writers have given us a bit of an update because, of course, Deadpool 3 falls under the sort of 20th Century Fox wing of Marvel. There's the Sony wing, there's the 20th Century Fox wing, and there's the Disney wing. Disney bought Fox, so Deadpool becomes part of Disney. And of course, with all this kind of jostling about with Marvel kind of cinematic universe and kind of this intellectual property and that intellectual property and this superhero and that, trying to meld them all together and bring them all into a cohesive world is a massively important thing for the fan base, but also for the studios too. So there's been some concern that perhaps because Deadpool 3 sits now under the kind of Mouse House auspices, family, Disney 5 family, that maybe Deadpool 3 would be sanitized, would be kind of not so rude, that they try and clean it up and all that kind of stuff. Though I have to say, once you've removed the kind of parental guidance on your Disney Plus app, you can quite quickly access a talking penis in Pam and Tommy. So I don't think Disney are entirely anti, pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable out there. Anyway, but the writers of Deadpool 3, which has been directed by Sean Levy, who, of course, is directing the Stranger Things series, which we've watched episode 4, about to watch episode 5. Is that right? Yeah, I think so. And wow, we are really enjoying it. We haven't reviewed it yet because we're all kind of watching them at different times and trying to catch up with each other and all that kind of stuff. Really enjoying it. Sean Levy, really, it's crisply directed, crisply executed, brilliant stuff. Well, of course, he's directing Deadpool 3, and the writers have said Disney have been very supportive with regards to the humour. When it comes to a particular joke, if we cross a line, we might hear something at some point, but we haven't heard anything yet. I think they've been incredibly supportive of what we're doing because obviously we're doing it separate from them, or we've been doing it separately from them for a long time. I think they've seen the success and they've had their own even greater success. So hopefully it'll be a marriage made in heaven. Yeah, let's hope it doesn't get diluted, because I think one of the joys of Deadpool 3 is just how it's willing to go to places no other superhero franchise is willing to go, other than The Boys. Ba-ba-bum-bum, ba-ba-bum-bum, ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-bum-bum-bum. Christoph Waltz. Any Christoph Waltz fans here? I've banged on about this actor to my family since Inglourious Bastards, where he's in that first scene. He won a Best Supporting Actor for that. You know, when people talking about this news story that I'm about to kind of share with you, say Christoph Waltz, the star of Inglourious Bastards and the star of No Time to Die. No Time to Die. Pfft. Yeah, all right, okay, he was goodish. But no, forget that. Django Unchained, come on, guys. How could you not mention Django Unchained? That was, and I feel for Christoph Waltz. I think he's kind of really struggled. He's had that sort of, did he win 2 Oscars? I think he might have won 2 Oscars for both films. He's had that double Oscar curse where it's like he's almost so good, everyone thinks, no, you're too good for me, we can't work with you. And he's not really had a project to really sink his teeth into. I think that's about to change. Christoph Waltz is about to play the legendary Hollywood director Billy Wilder in a project called Billy Wilder and Me. It's to be directed by Stephen Frears, the seminal British director, written by Christopher Hampton. It's their first, so Stephen Frears and Christopher Hampton, if you remember, did Dangerous Liaisons years ago. So they're coming back together for this. The synopsis is a curious one. It's based on a book by Jonathan Coe, and this is the synopsis. In the summer of '77, an innocent young woman begins working for famed director Billy Wilder and his screenwriter on a Greek island during the filming of a movie called Fedora. When she follows Wilder to Germany to continue the shoot, she finds herself joining him on a journey of memory into the heart of his family history. So I think this is going to be, this is going to be quite an emotional film. It's not necessarily going to just be a sort of biopic about Billy Wilder, the director, though he's going to be in there. I think this is going to take a slightly different angle and sort of a round the back sort of portrait, if you like, of Billy Wilder. Billy Wilder, of course, directed such classics such as Some Like It Hot, The Apartment, Double Indemnity, Sunset Boulevard. He's an absolute corker. And interestingly, Christoph Waltz says in the press release regarding his being cast this, which I think is a really lovely little aphorism or little kind of philosophical thought that we should all embrace every morning that we wake up. As Christoph Waltz said, Billy Wilder said, "You have to have a dream so you can get up in the morning. A Stephen Frears movie from a Christopher Hampton script produced by Jeremy Thomas should do the trick for me." And so long as they can kind of pull up on Christoph Waltz, an incredibly playful and unique kind of actor with such sort of curious reservoirs of energy and bubble and all that kind of stuff. I think this could really work, and could we be looking at another Oscar nod for Christoph Waltz? Orlando Bloom, I don't know what you make of Orlando Bloom. I think of Orlando Bloom from Lord of the Rings, and I think of Orlando Bloom from Pirates of the Caribbean. That's pretty much it. He's joining Pete Davidson. Pete Davidson is so stupidly busy. Not only has he got all these movie projects that he's doing now, okay, he's leaving Saturday Night Live finally after all these years, but he's also on the phone now to Kim Kardashian in her new series, The Kardashians. So, but anyway, Pete Davidson just gets busier and busier. Orlando Bloom is joining Pete Davidson on a movie for A24, the powerhouse producers also of the movie Men that's released this week, and they're joining each other in a movie called Wizards. And Wizards is directed by David Michôd, and he's done a couple of films recently. I think The Rover was one, but my most notable film by David Michôd is Animal Kingdom. Oh my God. Ben Mendelsohn, the most chilling character in Animal Kingdom. Cracking film, check it out. Not for the faint-hearted, though. This new film is, as I say, stars Pete Davidson, Naomi Scott, and now Orlando Bloom, and Sean Harris. Its synopsis is this. It follows 2 hapless pothead beach bar operators who run into trouble when they stumble across stolen loot that they really should have just left alone. I like that. I love it when you've got characters stumbling across lost treasure or intercepting a criminal act of some form, and then they get caught up in it. Check out a movie called A Simple Plan by Sam Raimi, starring Billy Bob Thornton. Really, really good movie. So Orlando Bloom is to star in this, and as I say, it's directed by David Mitchell. It's based on a story by Joel Edgerton, interestingly, the actor, and of course Orlando Bloom is soon to be seen in Amazon's second series of Carnival Row. Hunger Games, the prequel to the Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, got a sort of teaser trailer. We haven't shown it on the channel because nothing really happens. It's kind of like a graphic of the songbird just kind of moving and all that kind of malarkey. But this is the prequel. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games films. It's based on the novel of the same name by Susan Collins. It's set, obviously, prior to the events of the Hunger Games films, and it pivots around President Coriolanus Snow, who was obviously played by Donald Sutherland, who's such a sort of malevolent and hideous figure. But this is a much younger Coriolanus Snow, and he'll be playing alongside a character called Lucy Gray, who's going to be played by Rachel Zegler, who obviously Rachel Zegler is the star of West Side Story, again it's directed by Steven Spielberg. The movie's to be directed by Francis Lawrence, and he says of casting Rachel Zegler, Lucy Gray, the character, is a perfect match for Rachel as an actress. The character's bold, independent and defiant, but also vulnerable, emotional and loving. Rachel will make this character unforgettable. We really liked the Hunger Games. Philip Seymour Hoffman, there was the tragedy of him dying in the middle of making the original films, and then they kind of CGI'd, didn't they? They kind of digitally kind of remastered his face for a couple of scenes in the last one. They're long, they were big, their world building was complete. I liked it. I liked the world building, and so yeah, so I'm kind of excited about this. I don't know whether we'll ever recapture the sort of shock and horror of that first moment in the first Hunger Games, where they're all in the middle of this field on their podiums, and then suddenly the klaxon goes off, and boom, they're all off killing each other. It's an interesting kind of critique on celebrity culture and competitive. So there's a bit of kind of the purge in there. There's also a bit of the whole sort of Big Brother Survivor type thing in there too. For some streaming news now, and Lord of the Rings. What am I most excited about? The Boys has just landed. I've got to watch that. Obi-Wan, I'm about to watch the most recent 2 episodes of that. Stranger Things, it's busy out there. It's busy out there. I'm struggling to find time to watch these things. But God almighty, Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, that's coming to Amazon later in the year. Oh, so excited. But I have to confess, one of the things I was worried about all the way through, or have been worried about, is where are the hobbits? Are there going to be hobbits? This is set so far before the Shire and Hobbiton and all that kind of stuff. Where are the hobbits? Fear not. Fear not, there aren't necessarily hobbits, but their forefathers are something called Harfoots. And guess what? There's a Harfoot in this series called Sadok Burrows, don't you know? These are the answers to the hobbits. And Sadok Burrows is going to be played by none other than national treasure, really, and TV legend, comedy legend, Lenny Henry. And I'm excited about this, because Lenny Henry is, unbeknownst to most, a huge fan of the whole kind of Tolkien realm. But of course, this is really significant because he's playing a Harfoot. And let me read what Lenny Henry says about this. If you can't see it, you can't be it. He says, finally, in this show, kids are going to see people of colour taking up space in the centre of a fantasy series. We're very visible in this world, and that's exciting. It's really exciting. Unfortunately, a little bit like with Obi-Wan Kenobi and the recent racist sort of trolls of one of the key characters in that, there's a danger and there's a worry that you're going to get fans of this Tolkien realm who are racists, but that doesn't mean fans of Tolkien's realm are racist. Do you know what I mean? You get bad eggs in all franchises, in a sense. So I think this is really wonderful, and I think it's really a really important step in the right direction, and great that he's actually going to be one of what I'm most excited about is who are the hobbits in this, and in fact they're the Harfoots, and Lenny Henry's going to be one of them, and I think that's rather nice. And finally, Obi-Wan Kenobi, which as I say, I'm in the middle of watching. I'm really enjoying it. I'm taking my time with it because I'm relishing it, because it's really sort of taking me back to the original sense of the original films, especially as it slots in just before A New Hope. Well, Ewan McGregor has recently been in interviews, obviously been doing the rounds, promoting the series and what have you, and he talks about, I'm presuming for some of you, if you haven't watched it, this is a spoiler alert right now, he talks about how when Hayden Christensen was on set as Darth Vader, Ewan McGregor describes it as one of the greatest moments on any film set that I have ever been on or seen. I mean, that's quite something for Ewan McGregor. He describes the day when hundreds of crew members stormed the set of the Disney Plus show to see Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader Vader once again. And I suppose it's quite a big thing, isn't it? And I love the fact that on set and behind the scenes there's as much excitement, if not possibly more excitement, than there is necessarily in the fandom and those watching. Ewan McGregor went on to say, I was like, why are there so many people in today? Hayden walks out in a suit and I was like, of course, that's why everyone's here. Everyone's here to see this moment. I've never quite seen a crew react the way they reacted when Hayden came on set for the first time as Darth Vader. And there's some talk already of a spin-off series from Obi-Wan Kenobi, a bit like the Book of Boba Fett that spun off from Mandalorian, but there's already talk of a possible spin-off series starring Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader. Now, I do worry about that. Isn't the thing about Darth Vader that you're always left wanting a bit more? And if you get a bit too much of him, suddenly his malevolence becomes a little bit diluted? I don't know. And sometimes we've had so much of his origin story, don't we just want him to be bad? It's just a thought. It's just a thought. And so that brings us to films of the week. And I've got sort of two films, really, that I've picked out. One we've already reviewed on the channel. That's Men. This is a sort of folk horror film directed by Alex Garland, who made Annihilation. He also made Ex Machina, one of the best films about AI I think ever made. It stars Rory Kinnear and Jessie Buckley, a woman who's trying to rebuild her life in the aftermath of her husband's apparent suicide. And suddenly all sorts of malevolent happenings happen in her sort of bolt hole getaway in the sort of idyllic rural forests of somewhere. She's in a house, she's on her own, and suddenly she becomes assaulted and surrounded and badgered and horrified by men. This is a horror film about men. It pivots around masculinity, misogyny, toxic masculinity. Check out our review. I won't say too much more. Go and check it. If you go and fancy it, go and see it. It gets particularly gory, I would say that. Very gory. There's a lot to like in it, and there's a lot to marvel at, but take a sick bucket. And the other film this week is something called Bergmans Island. I think this is much for sort of film scholars more, this film. It stars Tim Roth and Mia Wasikowska, I always get her name wrong, and Vicky Krieps. And it's a film about two American filmmakers who head out to the island of Faroe to essentially find inspiration where the director Ingmar Bergman shot most of his films. And then as the days pass by and time moves on, the things sort of creep into their relationships. Creative sort of pressures and stresses and competitions and all this kind of and dilemmas start to kind of twist their relationship, and their coupledom is put under inordinate pressure. But yeah, it's the central thesis or the central idea is very filmic. You might need some film history to kind of really enjoy it. And there you have this week's Weekly Rushes, a rushed rush through the weekly streaming and movie news. We hope you've enjoyed it. Tell us what you think of some of the stories. What are your thoughts? And also, I'm at the Sundance Film Festival in London, the London end of the Sundance Film Festival, interviewing a load of the directors there, watching a lot of the movies. And so we'll be bringing you lots of kind of previewy kind of stuff about some of the sort of more indie films that are coming to your screens in the coming months. Have a fabulous film watching week.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.